All right. Come early. And get a seat for the scariest comedy of all time, Young Frankenstein. Welcome back to Entertainment Rebooted, specifically Cinema Revisited, Mel Brooks, where we are watching through the majority of the films from legendary filmmaker Mel Brooks. I am joined, as usual, by my esteemed co-host, DJ. Say hi, DJ.
Hello.
DJ, tonight we watched none other than the cinema masterpiece, Young Frankenstein, and it was your first viewing of this film.
All the way through.
All the way through.
Yeah, I've seen it like in pieces. It's one of those quotable films that I've know parts of, but not got all the way through it.
Well, since you've seen it for the first time all the way through, how about for those viewers out there, all 15 of them, maybe one of them has not seen this film as well. Would you be so gracious as to give a brief synopsis of Young Frankenstein?
It's actually a pretty easy one to summarize. It takes a lot of homage from the 4 early Frankenstein films from the Universal series. So Frankenstein, Bride of Frankenstein,
Son of
Frankenstein, Ghost of Frankenstein. Takes a lot from those. One of the big things is it's a distant relative of it's a grandson of the original Dr. Frankenstein. Is kind of like poked fun at for the fact that he's got his family history. Gets the estate of his grandfather, goes back home, learns about the monster, creates one for himself, and just chaos ensues. But it's a comedic take on it rather than a more monstrous take. It does a really good job of mirroring the original like horror-ish of the Universal films without being, it's not like body horror, it's just like straight old school like horror film with comedy elements, and just goes on to some fun, fantastic twists. Especially the ending. But that's the film, like just kind of like a retread of old school, much like other Mel Brooks films that exist. You know, it's a parody retread of existing material while paying homage to it.
Yeah, it does feel kind of like a spiritual sequel, like a successor of sorts.
It does actually,
to classic Universal Frankenstein,
and it actually feels more like it fits in the series than other ones that have Mel Brooks done. It feels like a Frankenstein film.
Yeah,
it has some hard comedy in it, but it sits well in the genre,
which is always very important. Speaking of staying on genre, Cinema Revisited, we like to talk about the good, the bad, the ugly, and the iconic of all the films that we discuss, and then we also get into things of what are ideas that we have if we were given the need to make the film in modern times. Although with Mel Brooks films, we've found that a lot of times we don't really have a lot of notes because, yeah, they're products of their time, but at the same time, these are kind of timeless creations.
Yeah, they are very timeless, and they're doing them any kind of different. It's unique. It's so unique. It's hard to copy without it just being a copy. To do it again is difficult.
Perhaps instead of rewriting the specific genre, like the specific film to modern times, we could talk about maybe what would be an interesting film for modern times for this kind of recreation, this kind of spoof,
like a spiritual,
like a spiritual successor. Like, so for
kind of like we do with Blazing Saddles, where we're like, it's kind of hard to do this, but like Tropic Thunder follows like the theming of it. That would be a good way to do it. We could do that.
So we'll switch it up that way. But we're not going to switch up the good, the bad, the ugly, and the iconic. Hopefully, let's start.
It works too well.
It works very well. It's why we continue to do it and recreate it and rehash it
over and over and over.
over and over again with 4 different series, including the Universal Monster movies, the Godzilla films, and then, of course, our newer series on B movies.
Actually, on that point, that's actually kind of fun because this one was one I was really looking forward to more than any of the other Mel Brooks films, even though there's so many good ones. We have watched through the Universal series, and so we have seen all of the Frankenstein films that this film is based on. Yeah. And recently, like in the last year, we've watched all of them. And so it was really cool to see that transition in from that to this. That was just like really fun.
Yeah.
And so this is going to make this a really fun one for me. So
yeah.
I'm excited.
All right, let's start with the good. What is the good of Young Frankenstein?
So a lot of the things that make Mel Brooks films in general like good is they're just like a fun, clean, like silly comedy. They do a lot of fourth wall breaking, a lot of like different kinds of things like that. But this film, out of all the ones we watched, is more Gene Wilder in it than Mel Brooks. It's his humor, the subtlety, the going from quiet to loud, the kind of like his character shifts that he does. What I really enjoyed about this film, and what I would give it as a really good, strong good, is just the Gene Wilder effect in the film. His fingerprints are all over it, and you feel it, and it makes it a little more unique than some of the other Mel Brooks stuff. Not in necessarily a bad or good way, just different. It's just a different kind of humor, different kind of comedy. It is definitely more paying tribute to where it came from. A lot of other Mel Brooks stuff is irreverently like making fun of it, right. Like in a very like.
It's very clear. It can be a bit heavy-handed.
Yeah, exactly. This one is more subtle, and it feels more like he's a fan of Frankenstein and he wants to do it, but in his own way, rather than just straight pasting it onto the wall. And it's just a good time. Like the character elements, especially the about last quarter of the film is just pays great respect to the source, not just the films, but the book that it's based on. I mentioned this before we started filming. It's like the line that the monster gives at the end is from the book. Like he's that intelligent, like the monster from the book was wanting love, but he ends up like using fear as a weapon because he's just trying to express himself. And I do a really good job of like of paying tribute to every ounce of Frankenstein. It's just a good time.
Yeah. One thing that I would say is good about this film that may actually get overlooked, I think, is the intelligent layout and set design.
Yeah.
And I'm not just talking about the fact that, they're using different props and things like that from the actual Universal films. Like, as a fan of the Universal monster movies that we have watched so far, Dracula and Frankenstein, they use a lot of the set pieces from those films specifically. What I mean is, one issue that we have had with specifically Son of Frankenstein is the set design doesn't feel intelligent. It feels very janky, and it's hard to tell where you are in relation to the house. The house is so laid out and janky, weird.
And they constantly shift. Like each of the films, like just, it doesn't even borrow from itself. It just is completely different.
Yeah. Whereas this one, not only is it a thing of, you have these gorgeous pictures that lay out the scene. You have the town, you have all these things, and the castle feels like it matches the town, at least the matte painting that they put up, and that's just brilliant. But the thing too is that as you're following the characters around the castle, it feels like this giant castle that is actually intelligently laid out. It makes sense where they are finding the secret lab. Why wouldn't the secret lab be connected to the bedroom? Why wouldn't he have a secret passage in his bedroom? And why isn't the lab in the basement of the castle? It's not a separate building. It's not some weird, janky, watchtower way far away from the house. It is in his house. It is in a secret passage within the house. To times I think it gets looked over when there is really intelligent set design where as you are going through the film, just where the characters are, it feels believable.
Yeah, and it's consistent.
And that's the other thing too, is it's consistent.
It is consistent throughout the film. That was actually a problem we had with the very first Frankenstein film is the sets change over time, which and was kind of ugly at the time too, because like you can tell they filmed this over time, and the sets weren't consistent.
Yeah.
Which gets better with time. But this film, like, there's a lot of inconsistencies that are done on purpose for comedy, but the sets remain like consistent and really intensely in part of the film. You don't feel abstract. The scenes fit into what's going on.
Yeah.
Really well.
So I just think that deserves to be pointed out as a good we don't really talk about set design.
Well,
very much
it's like they fixed the problem with the original Frankenstein films. It's like he had a pet peeve. Like he watched what we did, and he's like, if I remake Frankenstein, I'm gonna make sure the sets are consistent. They joke and make fun and spoof, but the one thing they were anal on was making sure the sets for design was consistent throughout the film. I felt myself in there like, hey, he understands. He knows what the pain is like watching these films change over time.
Speaking of pain, my transition skills are unmatched.
Oh yes.
What's the bad?
That one's actually really easy. It's actually the same problem that I've had with a lot of the ones. Is it's really slow burn to get going, and this one was actually one of the worst ones that we've watched. It just takes forever to get to the point, and it's unlike some of the other ones that have a little bit of comedic elements or some kind of good plot development or even character development. The beginning opening scene when they're in the laboratory, when he's in the site, great, amazing way to open, and then nothing happens for the next 20 minutes of the film.
Yeah, that's fair.
There's a long, it opens. It is the best opening any of them have, which makes the slow part even more painful. Because so many other films were just took a while to get there. Especially Blazing Saddles was like this long burn, but enjoyable little tidbits. This one opens up on a banger.
Oh yeah,
and then has a long pause, and you're just like, oh, where'd the movie go? Like that was great. What just happened? And then, but then it picks. It doesn't let you like sit there and suffer through it for too long, but you feel it.
Yeah. You can kind of feel where you get to the point where you're like, okay, let's continue on. Let's get to the monster part.
Yep,
let's get
exactly.
To the Frankenstein part of this movie. I agree with you on that. That can be a bad of this film. It doesn't necessarily derail it, but it is bad.
I think it also juxtaposing it against the original one, where the time from Frankenstein conceiving his idea to the making of the monster is very quick. In the film, this one gives a lot more character development to the Frankenstein character, and then just doesn't do anything with it for so long. The train scene stuff, a good bit of little silly humor, but especially there's like this little background thing that are really clever, where he's like sitting all train in New York, and there's a conversation going in the background, and then they go, and then he's all the way to Transylvania, and the exact same conversation is going on in a separate different language. That's funny and clever, but it's still dragging against the plot. And you feel it.
Yeah.
That's all I got for that one. It's just slow.
Yeah.
Slow burn.
Slow burn at first. Let's see. Bad.
There's actually a couple of things I thought of for bad. That was just the one that was like my biggest pet peeve.
Yeah, I mean, overall, it's a very solidly put together film. There's very few things that you look at and just go, yeah, this is definitely just bad or ugly about it. I'm trying to think of something that I could say that's actually bad. There is no bad. It's a perfect film. It's a 10 out of 10.
Well, I mean, I could give you another one that got to me, but it's a little long-winded. You think it's going to end about 3 different times. It gets to this point where, like, Frankenstein's like going to learn his lesson about the monster, but then he goes and then coddles him, and it like keeps.
You know what?
jilting.
I'll jump on that. I think I have a bad here.
Okay.
Not really necessarily the long-windedness of it, but I would say that because of how many different Frankenstein movies there've been, and they want to reference all of them, and they want to put all these different little hints and things like that in it, sometimes the film jumps to get to a reference.
Yes.
Sometimes it feels as if the film
It
jumps
feels
to a
chopped up
new
a little bit.
reference just to be like, hey, remember when? So I think that a few of the times the movie in and of itself just kind of loses itself slightly and then jumps back to itself in order to get a reference. But the jump point isn't necessarily really the story or a clean transition. It's more of just, hey, remember that reference?
A good example of that is when they get the girl in there. And it's a good scene, but then it immediately jumps to the blind man, like it kind of does in the original, and then it goes to a different film all of a sudden. It's like it shows those two scenes.
Well, the blind man's
own.
in the second film.
Correct.
The girl's in the first one.
Correct. But
That's a clean transition.
that is.
Yeah.
And then after it goes from the blind man, it goes to an entirely different subplot again.
Yeah. Well, no, and then it jumps kind of where it's like the villagers are starting to do their riot, and then the monster's getting attracted back to the house by the music and stuff like that. But it is just one of those things where sometimes it feels like they jump. The biggest jump, in my opinion, is probably... Shoot, I had it like right on the top of my head. That it jumped. It jumped really bad, and it was just so that there was a reference.
There was a couple of scenes I noticed like that just felt really like just rough, but none of them stand out hard enough to like derail the film. But
well, no, it's
feel
like
it.
if you think about it, it kind of makes sense, but at the same time, it is like having seen a lot of the movies, you just kind of jump. You see the jump and you go, "Oh, you just did that for the reference." Like the town hall meeting.
Yeah.
The town hall meeting just kind of, it jumps to a town hall meeting to jump to another town hall meeting to jump to. Mm-hmm. So I would just say that's at times the plot in and of itself feels like it got jumbled just so that they could fit more references. How about Ugly?
So that one is a lot tougher. There was a few things that bothered me about the film, but there wasn't really a whole lot that like stood out so bad to be like harsh.
Yeah, like here's a warning. Like if you recommend the movie to somebody, what's just something that you warn people about?
Yeah, like the one thing.
Yeah, what is the one thing that you warn people
for
about?
me, it's actually part of the thing I kind of like about the film, but it would stand out, and it really is a personal thing. It's dry.
Oh yeah.
It is incredibly dry. If you want, like, this is like kind of like Napoleon Dynamite was going for. Dry humor. There is a lot of dry humor in this. There's a lot of there's some slapstick. There's some more in your face humor too.
And a little bit of meta.
Yeah, and some meta humor, some fourth wall breaking, some inner jokes, but there are a lot of dry moments where it's just quiet, calm, nothing's really happening, but you can enjoy it for what it is, but you have to. And I think a good bit of it too is if you haven't seen, had I not watched all the other Universal monster films like right before this, I feel like I wouldn't appreciate it to the extent that I do. And so that dry like prerequisite requirement can be an Ugly, I think, depending on the audience. It's very audience dependent. This worked well for me. I enjoy dry humor, and I had recently watched other films, so those hit real smooth for me. Without that, I could see this movie being just ugly for its dryness. Like, could really set people off, especially a modern audience who isn't used to. I mean, when I first started Universal films, I actually expected them to be a lot drier than they were because they were such early films, but they're not. They're really well done. This is actually this film is what I expected to get out of those. It kind of is what I thought I would get. So, yeah, that would be my Ugly there.
Yeah, I mean, I would agree. I guess like not necessarily just like ugly, but something I would definitely warn somebody about. This film is a lot more Gene Wilder's sense of humor than Mel Brooks's.
Yes.
Gene Wilder does have just more of a subtler, drier sense of humor.
Like the Willy Wonka character from when he plays Wonka. That is that situational, like dry, whoa, is he just insane or is he weird? That's his kind of style. This is definitely more that.
Well, definitely. And it's a thing too of this film works because Mel Brooks has his fingers in it. Like you can tell that there is some Mel Brooksisms in it, and he's directing it and he's putting together the film. At times, I guess just a warning is like if you're expecting like an outright laugh fest like a Mel Brooks film, it's not really going to be like that.
No.
This is like Haunted Honeymoon, but if it was good. Haunted Honeymoon is Gene Wilder's horror comedy that he made himself. So it is more along those lines than something like...
You can tell that Mel Brooks tamed Gene Wilder a little bit in this, is a way to put it. If it had been pure Gene Wilder, it might have been a little harsher to watch.
It would have been... It probably would have had more humorous elements, but Gene Wilder kept it to be serious enough that it had a bit of a plot. And a lot of the humor turns very subtle and it works off of each other instead of it just being completely outrageous.
Fair enough.
So yeah, that's it's not really necessarily like ugly, but it is something that I would just kind of be like, hey, if you've watched Mel Brooks films but you haven't seen this one, it is more Gene Wilder mixed with Mel Brooks than a Mel Brooks.
Yeah.
Yeah. Iconic.
I actually have two for this that are kind of interrelated, so I'm gonna let you go first this time.
Yeah.
Just in case you take one of them, I can take the other.
Let's see. Iconic. I think what makes this movie iconic is that it's a spoof that is done lovingly.
All right, so you took one of mine. But just a quick interject. Mine was this feels like a sequel to the original ones rather than a like a remake spoof. It feels like it belongs in the universe. It feels like it is a Universal monster film.
Yes. It is one of those things.
But I'll let you go ham on it.
All right. Well, if I'm going to go ham on it, DJ, you have to let me go ham.
Nope. I'm not going to let you talk for the rest of the time.
But the thing is that what makes this movie iconic is the fact that it is a spoof. It is making fun of a lot of things that are just like Universal monster movieisms, monster movieisms in general, specifically Frankenstein ones. But it's done lovingly. So it's a thing where it's like, it doesn't feel like it's insulting it. It isn't making fun of it. It's like you're laughing with it. You watch the movies, you have the campiness, you have the nostalgia.
Like you're laughing with the movie rather than at the movie.
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's a film that is not making itself funny at the expense of other films. It's not necessarily going to the first few Frankenstein films from the Universal monster movies and saying, this movie is so stupid. Look how stupid it is.
No, it's actually like, look how genius these films were. Yeah. Let's make fun of them anyway.
Well, and it's not even like, let's make fun of them. It's literally just like, let's just have fun in the world. There are characters in it that they're not even just like spoofs of characters. The inspector is pulled almost entirely directly from... He was in Son of Frankenstein, right?
I think so.
Or was it
I remember the one with the fake hand, yeah.
Yeah, but he is pulled almost directly from that movie. And it's just because it's a funny, goofy, ridiculous character.
They exaggerate him a little bit, and that's all they do. They literally just slightly exaggerate him.
Yeah.
That was all they did. And like when he's slapping the thing, his hand, he did that in the original movie. He moved his hand. That was a thing he did. They just made it more exaggerated.
Well, yeah.
That's it.
Yeah. All they did is make him a little more exaggerated. And the thing is, too, that he was a little hard to understand, if I remember right,
yes.
when he's talking. But in this one, they just kind of made it a thing where it's like, yeah, it's part of his character. And the rest of the town is just, what? What? They're doing the part of the audience. But it is just a thing. I think it's iconic because a lot of spoof films just don't really seem to understand it, where it's like a good spoof like this, a good comedy like this, you kind of have to treat what you are making fun of lovingly.
Yes. That, I think, is a problem a lot of modern parodies suffer from, is they don't treat the source material with, like, respect. They just butcher it, or just they crap all over it, and they don't actually give it any kind of... And Mel Brooks does do it with his stuff. He does it with a medical respect as well. Gene Wilder just did it more of like a straight love letter, rather than like a paying that homage or that kind of like respect. He just was like, I want to make a Frankenstein film, but I have to do it with Mel Brooks, so it has to be funny. Exactly. It's like, yeah, but it does the old classic horror really well.
Yeah, and the thing is, it's a well put together film.
Yeah,
you know, it's not just like an outright comedy, and it's not a drama. It's not just a sequel. It's like a loving homage to it.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's the iconic thing.
So that was the other one that I had that I thought was the female leads being like intelligent players in the act.
Oh yeah.
So a lot of the things of the original films that you and I actually complained about, it
usually is our ugly. The female
leads
characters
are often they're like not interested like in the main character, or they're like just dumb as a rock, or
their furniture.
Yes, they're treated like furniture. And so many of them. And that gets a little better over time, but it never really super improves. This film, the assistant, she's intelligent.
Yeah, it never says that she's just there because she's unqualified. She is a lab assistant.
And she's qualified. She has smart, she says intelligent things and interacts with the doctor, and he doesn't patronize her. He treats her like a colleague.
Yeah.
Then the joke becomes that when they sleep together, that's actually the joke, is that she's like the intelligent character, but she's like constantly acting like she kind of acts like on him and stuff, but she's really intelligent. Yeah. And they end up together anyway. Well, and they make fun of that whole dynamic the whole film, because he sees her as a true lab assistant, and she wants to be like the bimbo, like brainless person for him, but she's not. She's too intelligent for that.
Well, but the other thing too is that they kind of play on this. If you've seen the Universal Monster movies, if you've seen our series, we've pointed it out multiple times that there isn't chemistry with the initial couple.
Yeah.
The very first part of the movie literally is Gene Wilder does not have chemistry with his fiance.
Yep. And that's on purpose.
And the monster has better chemistry with the fiance.
Yeah.
So it's just one of those things where it's just like it ties back in. It's just like it's kind of lovingly pointing it out. But
I felt that really hard when I saw that beginning part. I was like, I feel like Gene Wilder watched the original right before he made this, because every little detail that we made pokes about on the original films, he corrects in this one, or exaggerates or makes fun of.
Yeah.
When they were having that thing where they like don't really want to touch each other, and she's like, "Oh, my hair, don't mess up my hair," and I was like, "Oh my gosh, this is literally like the original," because like his wife had more chemistry to his brother than him.
Right. Or
we were talking about that. We're like, wait, are you two together? Or are they together? Who is the couple?
But the fact that the monster gets the girl is just such a funny twist.
It is really good, and just a funny mocking of the original, because the monster kidnaps her, and like we even made the joke that like, oh look, she found someone she might actually care about, because she had like no love for Frankenstein at all.
Well,
but then the later films, like the second one, has the same Frankenstein. They have a bit more chemistry in the second film, and then the third one, like the son, like he actually has
a wife and a kid, and
they actually have some chemistry. So they kind of correct that, but you can tell he's just making straight fun of the original film. That's just iconic to me, that he takes the tropes that in the original film where the side characters were just furniture. The women, the main characters were just furniture. No, it's they're both intelligent. Like real characters and people.
Well, even
he makes fun of the chemistry and all that stuff from the original. He does a really good job with the characters, but they feel like people.
Well, even the Frau Blucher. Where's the Winnie? But she's manipulative. She's smart. She's this background character that's manipulating the scene, and she's intelligent too. There isn't really a character that's dumb. Even Igor is not dumb.
No, actually,
he's not smart, but it's not.
He's
like
kind of a doofus, but he's intelligent.
Yeah,
he's it, and it takes it. Actually, I thought they were going to do it because the modern Igor, and we talked about this a lot when we did Dracula, right? Because Igor, I was actually a manipulative, intelligent character.
Yeah, he was actually evil.
He was actually like a villain.
Yeah. And Fritz,
they took Fritz was the actual original assistant. Igor takes a bit from Fritz and Igor both, but he's like background clever, but he's loyal. So this kind of feels like a lot more of where we get like the modern Igor, where I'm wondering if this might have been where it came from, because when we talked about this before, it's like everything we watched with Igor, the original Igor, is a very different character than Igor is portrayed in modern media. Where he's
evil, he's manipulative, he's intelligent.
Yes.
He's just a weird character, and he's deformed not because like he has a hunchback. He's deformed because he literally survived his own hanging.
That is correct, exactly. Whereas the modern Igor is the assistant to the doctor.
It's just Fritz.
That's become the new Igor. I think this is where that came from.
Yeah,
because everything before this doesn't have that. So that could almost be a little bit of an iconic as well. It's like I don't know if it is. I feel like I'd have to research it more to like know for sure.
Well,
this feels like the first representation of Igor as the assistant, the hunchback assistant. Whereas I was surprised by Igor in the other films. I was like, this is not who I thought it was. So yeah, that just the characters, the side characters, how they're just so well done and feel alive.
Yeah,
that's what I kind of pull up as iconic from this.
Yeah, and the cast has great chemistry off of each other. All the characters are interesting. Any character that has multiple lines is interesting.
Yes,
like you don't get a character where you're immediately
the council, when they're having the council, the two judges like up at the stand were they felt like real people.
Well, and the thing
felt like a real town, like with real order. They weren't like being goofy or stupid. They were like, "Hey, calm down. Let's talk this out."
And their only joke is if you're paying attention. The only joke that the elders actually say is, "We've lived through this 5 times."
Yes, which was great. It's all the other films. Yeah, and that's the thing too. This film kind of feels like it's in the same universe.
It could, yeah. It could
It feels like it fits in the universe of the original films.
Yeah,
it's just it follows it well. The whole thing is just a blast.
Absolutely, this film is it's a lot of fun. The film in and of itself is iconic. I think it is one of Mel Brooks's top films. Granted, I just
and it feels like a film. It doesn't feel like a parody movie like he usually does. This feels like its own film that fits in something that exists. It feels more like it's built into the universe rather than pulling from it.
Yeah, absolutely.
Which is a very different thing from the other films we watched.
Well, and it's even different than the other parodies that are directly from other movies.
12 Chairs is probably the only one of the ones we watched so far that feels that way too, because the producers feels like it's an original story, but it feels like it's making fun of a lot of movies, and Blazing Saddles even more so.
Well, Blazing Saddles,
and I'm also being a little biased here because I've watched a lot of the later ones that we're going to get to that we haven't got to yet that are very much just straight movie parodies.
Yeah.
This one feels like none of them that have come before will come after.
Yeah. All right. Moving into our next section. What would be if you had like just kind of a general, you're making a spoof comedy based off of horror that's kind of in the vein of Young Frankenstein, what would you say like a modern equivalent would be? What would be something that you would like to see or that you would personally make?
Well, one that comes to mind actually is Hotel Transylvania, but that one is a lot more comedy than it is serious. But that's a similar vein where it's taking like the Universal monsters and like putting them in a comedic like setup.
Yeah.
But I would think something like that, but more serious, more I think something like Dracula Untold Story. That one and like Hotel Transylvania feel like the two films that get close to the idea here. Dracula Untold is a very serious film, but it's a very like fan homage to the Dracula character, but makes him like a heroic figure. It pays to the lore.
Oh, right. Okay. I think you haven't really.
Well, what I mean like here is what I would like to do is take something that threads the needle between those two ideas.
Oh, okay.
That's what I was trying to get to. So the reason I had to kind of set the tone here. So you take Dracula Untold Story, which is a very serious retelling of Dracula
It's
character.
just Dracula Untold.
That's what Untold. Yeah, Dracula Untold. So Dracula Untold is this very serious film on the Dracula character, but it's more on like the Impaler idea, Vlad the Impaler. But he's a heroic figure that like self-sacrifice. Then you have like Hotel Transylvania that's like just straight comedy. I would thread the needle between those two with the Dracula myth, because Dracula would be a fun one to do something like this with. Dracula, especially like the Bela Lugosi Dracula, where it's like that staring eye thing. Just imagine that, where it's like you have like this serious, like tragic character where, because they do that with this. They kind of redeem the Frankenstein monster, something that we almost kind of wanted to see happen throughout the Frankenstein original films. Every film, it's like they try to make you feel for the monster, but ultimately always make him the villain.
Yeah.
They never give him a chance to like
fully redeem himself.
Yes, or to move on.
understood.
He's just stuck in a perpetual like childhood. This film gives closure to that character. I would like to do that with Dracula, where Dracula is like trying to redeem himself, but like there's like this dry slapsticky moments where he's like making mistake. Everybody thinks he's like still the evil monster that he is, but he's really trying to be better, and it's just like comedy ensues because nobody understands. The film I actually thought was actually kind of the closest to that was the Renfield film.
Yeah.
Renfield does what I would want to do, but instead of the Renfield character, it's Dracula that's doing this. Think of that, because Renfield does what I wanted to see, but it took the side character. I want to see Dracula do that. I want to see Dracula like trying to like move on with his life and like not be the villain that he is, or trying to like cure himself or whatever. Like he's trying to
Dracula in therapy.
Yeah, like just because.
Yeah.
But it's almost been done. Like a lot of these things have been done close to what I've wanted, but that's kind of ever since I saw we watched the Bela Lugosi Dracula like a year ago. I'm like, man, I would love to see like something that gives this character like closure in a comedic fun way. But I've yet. Renfield was really the closest I ever got. And we watched that, I think, a couple weeks after we watched Dracula. And I was like, hey, this is a fun twist on this character.
Yeah, we literally had just watched Dracula.
We had just watched Dracula.
Watched Renfield, yeah.
And so this what this feels like. You know, I watched that, and then we get to this. I'm like, man, it would be really cool to see some of the other monsters like get a comedic closure. Like I said, Hotel Transylvania does a decent job of giving Dracula closure, but it's almost pure comedy. I want to see a more serious film with those comedic elements. Now that I've seen this too all the way through, that makes me burn for that more. Your turn.
Okay. Well, so this film's made in the 1970s. It's playing homage to movies that happened in like the 1940s. So the way that I'm going to look at it is if I was going to remake a movie, it would have to be something that was like the 90s, something that was really big in the 90s, and doing it in a way that's kind of comedic but also kind of just fun. I think a thing that I would probably focus on is that a big thing in the 90s was probably slashers. You know, you have I Know What You Did Last Summer.
I actually originally thought, like, when I was thinking about this, I actually thought of the Halloween films or the Friday the 13th films was like my first thought, but I kind of ended up going off somewhere else. But
yeah, and I mean we already have kind of the loving parody of a slasher film, specifically Scream with Scary Movie.
Well, and Scream is exactly kind of what this is. Like it's
a serious it's
a serious film that pays homage to the source material while still being somewhat comedic about it.
Yeah.
But very much more serious about it. Scary Movie is definitely more of the comedy aspect.
Yeah. I think that what I would probably lean into is just like I'd go slasher genre. I'd probably make a slasher film, but there's kind of a bit of a comedy to it where perhaps we know who the slasher is and they're trying to like redeem themselves and people just
I actually have one that follows with it's I can't remember the name of the movie now. It's a couple of hillbillies a bunch of kids think they're murderers and they get themselves killed trying to like stop them, but it turns out they're just like in the wrong place at the wrong time.
Is that Tuckendale versus Evil?
Yeah, Tuckendale versus Evil. That's the one. Yeah,
I haven't seen that one.
That is kind of what you're going with, like, a little different, but that's what that is. That whole movie is literally just like, it's like they think these two hillbillies are murderers and they try to attack them and they accidentally get themselves killed, which only makes everyone else panic more, and it just goes insane.
I mean, maybe something like that, but at the same time, just kind of leaning into the fact of like going with like maybe like a more specific franchise, not necessarily redoing like Scary Movie with Scream, but really kind of leaning into the just slasher movie tropes. Maybe it's a former slasher and he's trying to like redeem himself and he's like, I just have these urges and stuff like that. I don't really understand what it is. I'm leaning more in line with a recent book that came out I just read recently. It's titled I Was a Teenage Slasher.
Oh, glory.
And it's a guy who involuntarily becomes a slasher. And so he has like a slasher movie, but he's like 100% aware of the fact that I don't really want to do this. It's just kind of like I black out and then I show up here and then it's just like I'm already here and I'm kind of doing the thing. So I'm going to go ahead and do it. It's an interesting book and it's an interesting take. I would probably take something like that, I Was a Teenage Slasher, but make that into a film.
That actually that'd be kind of a fun thing to do because the Young Frankenstein thing, that's what it does. It takes the Frankenstein thing and just kind of runs with it. It almost remakes the original film while acting as a sequel to it and acting as a love letter to it and acting as a parody to it at the same. It's a pretty impressive list of things that it does.
Yeah.
I think the only film actually I can think of in modern times that even kind of does similar is actually The Expendables of all things.
Well, yeah, where that's lovingly making a ridiculous 80s action movie.
Yes, yeah. It's a parody of 80s action movies and a love letter to 80s action movies and a parody of 80s action movies. All at the same time.
While being a serious film.
While being a serious film. Yeah, exactly. It's with some comedy elements.
Yeah.
That The Expendables is out of everything I think of. That is like the closest of what like this is. And even down to like being a little dry at times.
Yeah.
Is probably the best example I can come up with of taking a genre. That one isn't a specific set of films or material. It's just 80s action in general, but it's the same kind of spirit.
Yeah.
I don't think it's done very often. Like this level of skill to be able to parody something while paying so much respect to it is impressive, and I don't see anything really quite to this level being done, other than some stuff that's pretty close. Like I said, I know there's been some others. I just can't think of them at the moment. But yeah, Scream and Expendables are like the good examples I can come up with where that's been done with the slasher films and
80s
action respectively.
Yeah.
And honestly, and those films did well, and I think that's
Red, taking the like the Jason Bourne, the CIA killer contract people, and making it a comedy.
Red. Why was that so familiar? But I don't know what it is. Oh no, duh. Yeah. The old people. Yeah. The old CIA. Yeah, no, that's a good example too. Yeah. Red is a good one too. Yeah, and that has sequels as well. Yeah, those are good examples of doing that. Galaxy Quest.
Yeah, making like
Galaxy Quest is a good example. Making fun of Star Trek, but also paying respect to it as well. And it has serious moments in it. Like it takes itself the right amount of seriously. That's another good one. Yeah, I guess there are more than I thought of. I'm sure there are plenty out there I need to be considered, but this film kind of fits in with those levels of films.
Yeah.
Honestly, I think a lot of Mel Brooks stuff does in general, but this one especially.
Yeah.
I don't know. Once I see some of the other ones again, maybe I'll feel the same about them as well. We're not that deep into Mel Brooks, so we'll see how it goes.
Yeah, this is 4.
Yeah, it's 4 films in, and it's some of the lesser known stuff. Producers is well known, but specifically the newer one. But it is well known, the plot of it. It's one of those films. It's one of the earliest films to be turned into a musical and then into a movie based on the musical, which is done a lot now. That's the most recent one being, I think, Wicked is the one that's come out recently, which is a book turned into another book that was turned into a musical that is then turned into a film based on the musical. But yeah, Mean Girls.
Book that's turned into a movie that's turned into a musical that's turned into a movie musical.
Yes. Yeah, that seems to be a common trope now. But yeah, producers, 12 Chairs, Blazing Saddles. Blazing Saddles is the most Mel Brooksiest of those 3 so far. 12 Chairs is based on a book.
Yeah.
Blazing Saddles is just a parody of genre in general.
And The Producers is just an interesting story that's slightly a parody of Broadway.
Yes.
Yeah, in general, the industry. Yeah.
But mostly like kind of original, different content. This is really the first one of the Mel Brooks series that is a direct parody of a specific film franchise.
Yeah.
So, it's fun. This is groundbreaking here, and we've got more. We're gonna get into some really fun stuff coming up. So
yeah,
that's it for me.
That's it for me. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. We hope that you are enjoying this continuing series as we are watching all of the Mel Brooks films. If you like this format, we also do it with the Universal monster films as well as the Godzilla franchise. We also are getting into the swing of things with our newest series where we are watching B movies, so just movies in general that are just kind of cheesy, have a bad reputation, and talking about them.
Good reputation because they're so bad they're good.
Well, yeah, cult classics, but essentially just B movies. Movies that don't have like the hugest of reputations. Anyway, speaking of things that don't have huge reputations, we don't really have much of a reputation, and the way that we have a better reputation is if you leave a like on this video if you like it, subscribing if you haven't already, and of course sharing us with your friends. Let us know your thoughts in the comments in regards to this series of Mel Brooks in general, or Young Frankenstein specifically. We look forward to talking to you guys in the comments. Otherwise, we will see you guys in the next video.
Thank you for watching.